Sarah lives in a tiny flat over the gallery. As they walk back there, hand in hand, they leave dark footprints in the new snow. Okay, I get the paintings, but what's that? Villanelle asks, pointing to the cryptic installation in the gallery window. Sarah keys a code into the keypad by the door. Well, the stuffed weasel was a present, given to me as a joke. And the sprinkles were in the kitchen. So I put them together. Quite fun, don't you think? Villanelle follows her up a narrow flight of stairs. So it doesn't mean anything at all? What do you think? I don't think anything. I don't care. So what do you? Villanelle half turns and pins her to the wall, silencing her with her mouth. It's a moment that's been inevitable, but Sarah's still taken by surprise. Much later, she wakes to see Villanelle sitting upright in bed, her lean upper body silhouetted against the first dawn light. Reaching for her, Sarah runs a hand down her arm, feels the hard curves of her deltoid and bicep. What exactly was it that you said you did? She asks wonderingly. I didn't say. Are you going? Villanelle nods. Will I see you again? Villanelle smiles, and touches Sarah's cheek. Dresses quickly. Outside, in the little square, there's virgin snow, and silence. Back at the South Audley Street apartment, she kicks off her clothes and is asleep within minutes. When she awakes it's past noon. In the kitchen there's a half-full cafetiere of Fortnum and Mason's breakfast blend coffee, still warm. Several sizable carrier bags stand by the front door, where Constantine has left them. She checks the goods. A pair of tortoise-shell framed glasses with pale gray lenses. A parka with a fur-trimmed hood. A black polo neck sweater, a plaid skirt, black woolen tights and zip-up boots. She tries it all on, walks around, accustoms herself to the look. The outfit needs wearing in, so she drinks a cup of a cooling coffee, leaves the apartment building, and makes her way across Park Lane to Hyde Park. Again, that umber sky, against which the avenues of leafless beeches and oaks are a darker gray-brown. It's early afternoon but the light is already ebbing. Villanelle walks fast along the slush-banked paths, hands in pockets, head down. There are other walkers, but she barely glances at them. At intervals statues loom out of the dimness, their outlines blurred with encrusted snow. On a balustraded bridge across the Serpentine she pauses for a moment. Beneath a cracked and starred pane of ice the water is a lightless black. A realm of darkness and forgetting to which, on days like this, she feels herself almost hypnotically drawn. Tempting, isn't it? Villanelle turns, amazed to hear her thoughts so precisely echoed. He's about 30, lean-featured, in a well-cut tweed coat with the collar turned up. I wasn't planning on doing any swimming. You know what I mean. To sleep, perchance to dream. His eyes are steady, and as dark as the frozen waterway. You admire Shakespeare? He wipes snow off the balustrade with his sleeve, and shrugs. He's a good companion in a war zone. You're a soldier? Used to be. And now? He lifts his gaze to the distant glow of Kensington. Research, you might say. Well, good luck with that. She rubs her ungloved hands together, and blows into them. The light's going. And so should I. Home? The broken smile suggests they're sharing a private joke. That's right. Goodbye. He raises a hand. See you around. Hunching into her parka, she walks away. Just some fucked up weirdo hitting on her. Except that he wasn't. With that lethal English courtliness of his, he's both more and less threatening than that. And familiar, somehow. Is it possible that she's seen him before, perhaps in the course of the counter-surveillance exercises that she performs, almost subconsciously, wherever she goes? Is he MI5? Angling sharply southwards, she glances back at the bridge. The man has disappeared, but she still senses his presence. Heading northwards for the nearest exit she performs a cleaning run, designed to shake off any tail that she might have picked up. No one follows, no one changes direction, no one speeds up to match her pace. But if they're serious, whoever they are, they'll have a primary team foot following, and a secondary team on static surveillance, ready to latch on if she burns the primaries. Turning eastwards, Villanelle walks along Bayswater Road towards Marble Arch. Not racing, but fast enough to make any tail pick up his or her speed. She stops briefly at a bus stop as if resting her legs, discreetly checking the area for anyone in the calculatedly drab plumage of the professional pavement artist. There's no one obvious, but then if she had one of MI5's A4 teams locked onto her, there wouldn't be. Forcing herself to breathe steadily, she makes for the Marble Arch underpass network. With its multiple exits, it's a good place to expose and lose a tail. Descending the steps at Cumberland Gate, she surfaces beside the Edgware Road, and hovers in a sports shop entrance, watching the reflection of the underpass exit in the plate glass window. No one glances at her, no one breaks step. Strolling to the Marble Arch entrance, she speedwalks the 100-odd meters through the underpass, cuts back on herself by Speaker's Corner, and makes for the tube station. On the westbound Central Line platform, she lets the first 2 trains pass, scanning the platform for stay-behinds. The line's busy, and there are several possibles. A young woman in a gray windproof jacket, carrying a backpack. A bearded guy in a reefer jacket. A middle-aged couple holding hands. Stepping onto the 3rd train, she travels as far as Queensway, and then just as the doors are closing, squeezes out between them. Crossing the platform, she returns eastbound to Bond Street, surfaces, and hails a taxi in Davis Street. For the next 10 minutes she sends the driver on a circuitous route through Mayfair. A grey BMW follows them for a time, but then turns eastwards on Curzon Street with an irritable growl. A minute later a black Ford Ka appears in the wing mirror, and 3 turnoffs later is still there. As they coast into Clark's Mews, a choke point, Villanelle hands the driver a £50 note and issues swift instructions. 30 seconds later the taxi drifts to a halt, blocking the road, and the engine dies. As Villanelle slips out of a rear door, she hears the angry blare of the Ka's horn, but no one follows her down the narrow, brick-walled passageway, and when she doubles back 5 minutes later, the Mews is deserted. And perhaps, she tells herself later in the South Audley Street apartment, no one was following me anyway. What would be the point? If the UK intelligence services know who and what I am, then it's all over. There won't be an arrest, just a visit from a Special Forces action team, probably East Squadron, and cremation in a municipal waste incinerator. This, according to Constantine, is the British way, and nothing that Villanelle has seen of the British gives her the slightest reason to doubt him. But the East Squadron scenario is not going to happen, and with a smooth effort of will, she erases the apprehensions prompted by the afternoon's encounter. Curled like a panther on the white leather Eames chair, she raises a glass of pink Alexander II Black Sea champagne to the fading light. The wine is neither distinguished nor expensive, but it's a symbol of everything that in her other, earlier life she could never have dreamed of. And it suits her mood. She's in lockdown now, her focus already narrowing to the moment-by-moment details of the next day's action. Anticipation rises through her, as sharp and effervescent as the bubbles prickling to the surface of the champagne, and with it the ache of the hunger that never completely goes away. She coils and uncoils on the white leather. Perhaps she'll go out and have some more sex. It will help kill a few hours. Eve groans. What time is it? 6:45, murmurs Nico. Like every day at this time. Eve buries her face in the warm valley between his shoulder blades, clinging to the last vestiges of sleep. The strangulated coughing of the espresso machine overlays the measured tones of Radio 4's Today program. She's decided, during the night, to put an SO1 protection team on Victor Kedren. Coffee's done, Nico says. Okay. Give me a couple of minutes. Returning from the bathroom, she smacks her shin, not for the first time, on the low, glass-fronted fridge that he bought a month earlier on eBay. Shit, Nico, please. Do we have to have this thing here? He rubs his eyes. Not if you don't want milk in your coffee in the morning, Mishka. Besides, where else would you like me to put it? There's no room in the kitchen. Ensuring that the blind is down, it has a habit of shooting up without warning. Eve lifts her nightdress over her head, and reaches for her underwear. I'd argue that we don't need a medical standard refrigeration unit to cool one little milk jug. And if there's no room in the kitchen, it's because it's full of all your stuff. Ah, suddenly it's all my stuff? Okay, Swedish cookbooks? That solar-powered microwave. They're Danish. And that microwave is going to save us money. When? This is London NW3. There isn't any frigging sun for 11 months of the year. Either we get rid of some of your stuff, or we move somewhere bigger. And a lot less nice. We can't move. She dresses quickly. Why not? Because of the bees. He knots a dark brown tie over a silver gray shirt. Nico, please. Don't get me started on those fucking bees. I can't go into the garden, the neighbors are terrified of being stung to death. One word, Mishka. Honey. This summer, we could harvest 15 kilos per hive. I've spoken to the deli, and, yes, I know it all makes sense in the future. Your 5-year economic plan. But it's the here and now we have to deal with. I can't live like this. I can't think straight. They cross the tiny landing, stepping over a stack of back issues of astronomy now in an ancient, dented cardboard box marked oscilloscope testing equipment/cathode ray tube, and descend the stairs. I think the first directorate is working you too hard, Evika. You need to chill out. He checks the knot of his tie in the hall mirror, and gathering up a pile of exercise books from a shelf, shunts them into a battered Gladstone bag. You are going to make it back in time for the tournament at the club tonight, aren't you? Should do. The calculation being that with an SO1 team on Kedren, she won't feel duty-bound to attend his lecture, or political rally, or whatever it is. Eve pulls on her coat, and Nico sets the state-of-the-art alarm that Thames House has thoughtfully provided. The front door closes, and hand in hand, their breath vaporous, they make their way through the half-light of morning towards Finchley Road Tube Station. In the P3 office at Thames House, Simon Mortimer looks inscrutable as he puts down the receiver. Unless you can come up with a specific reason for changing your mind on Kedren, it's no go, he tells Eve. Too short notice. Eve shakes her head. That's ridiculous. SO1 could easily have a team in place at half a day's notice. Is the foot dragging coming from our end, or theirs? Ours, as far as I can tell. There's hesitation to deploy SO1 on the basis of what? The phrase used was female intuition. She stares at him. Seriously? Seriously. She closes her eyes. On the positive side, you have made your concern known. Your ass, if I may refer to it as such, is covered. I suppose you're right. But really, female intuition? What I said in my memo was that I was concerned that I'd underestimated the potential threat to Kedren. What exactly made you change your mind? On her screen, Eve calls up an article from Izvestia. Okay, this is from a speech he gave last month in Ekaterinburg. I'm translating. Our sworn enemy, which we will fight to the death, and to which we will never surrender, is American hegemony in all its forms. Atlanticism, liberalism, the deceitful, he actually says snake-like, ideology of human rights, and the dictatorship of the financial elite. Pretty standard stuff, surely? Agreed. But there's a huge tranche of the Russian and former Soviet bloc population who see him as a kind of messiah, and messiahs don't have a long shelf life. They're too dangerous. Well, let's hope he says his piece at the Conway Hall and pushes off fast. Let's hope. She rubs her eyes. I suppose I ought to go. Don't much feel like it, but... She exits the Izvestia page. Simon, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I should do something about, the way I dress? That female intuition comment makes me worried I'm sending the wrong message. He frowns. Well, I know you're not even slightly like that. And as we're so often reminded, discretion is the keynote of the Thames House style. But I don't think there'd be any harm in your, perhaps, venturing a teensy bit further afield than the Marks and Spencer's classic and indigo ranges. He looks at her a little nervously. What does your husband think? Oh, Nico lives in a fashion universe all of his own. He teaches maths. Ah. I just don't want to see this department's authority undermined, Simon. We make serious decisions, and we need to be taken seriously. He nods. Are you busy tomorrow afternoon? Not specially. Why? Well, I don't want to perpetuate any stereotypes here, but perhaps you and I could go shopping? The Vernon Hotel is a 6-story edifice faced with grey stone on the north side of High Holborn. Its clientele is, for the most part, as anonymous as its frontage, so reception manager Gerald Watts is happy to give his attention to the strikingly attractive young woman standing before him. She's wearing a fur-trimmed parka, and the eyes that meet his from behind the grey tinted glasses are bright and direct. Her accent, with its hint of France and suggestion of Eastern Europe, after 5 years at the Vernon's front desk Gerald considers himself something of an expert in these matters, is charmingly fractured. Her name, he discovers when he takes her credit card details, is Julia Panine. She's not wearing a wedding ring, absurdly, this pleases him. Proffering her key card to room 416 he allows their fingers to touch. Is it his imagination, or does he detect a flicker of complicity? Indicating with a raised hand that one of his assistants take her valise and show her to her room, he watches the easy sway of her hips as she walks towards the elevator. By the time that Eve arrives at Red Lion Square, it's 7:45. Inside the Conway Hall the crowd is about 200 strong. The majority of those who have come to hear Victor Kedren speak are already seated in the main hall, a few stand chatting against the wood-paneled walls, while others have found their way up to the gallery. Most are men, but there are a few couples here and there, and several younger women in t-shirts printed with Kedren's portrait. And there are other more enigmatic figures, male and female, whose predominantly black clothing is imprinted with slogans which might be musical, mystical, political, or all three. Looking around her, Eve feels a little out of place, but not threatened. The hall is filling fast, and the various tribes seem content to coexist. If the individuals present have anything in common, it is perhaps that they are outsiders. Kedren's audience is a coalition of the disenfranchised. Climbing the stairs to the gallery, she finds a seat at the front on the right-hand side, overlooking the stage and the lectern, and with a rush of guilt, realizes that she hasn't called Nico to tell him that she can't make it to the bridge tournament. She searches her bag for her phone. She doesn't tell him where she is, just that she can't come, and as always he's understanding. He never questions her about her work, her absences or her late nights. But she can tell that he's disappointed. It's not the first time he has had to apologize for her at the club. I must make it up to him, she tells herself. His patience isn't infinite, nor should it have to be. Perhaps we could go to Paris for a weekend. Take the Eurostar, stay in a little hotel somewhere and walk around the city hand in hand. It must be so romantic in the snow. In the hall, the lights flicker and dim. On the stage a ponytailed man walks to the lectern and adjusts the microphone. Friends, I greet you. And I apologize if my English is not so good. But it gives me pleasure to be here tonight, and to introduce my friend and colleague from St. Petersburg State University. Ladies and gentlemen, Victor Kedren. Kedren is an imposing figure, broad and bearded, in a battered corduroy jacket and flannel trousers. There's applause as he walks out, and a few cheers. Taking her phone from her bag, Eve grabs a shot of him at the lectern. It's cold outside, Kedren begins. But I promise you, it's colder in Russia. He smiles, his eyes dead leaf brown. So I want to talk to you about the spring. The Russian spring. Rapt silence. In the 19th century there was a painter named Alexei Savrasov. A great admirer, as it happens, of your John Constable. Naturally, like all the best Russian artists, Savrasov succumbed to alcohol and despair and died penniless. But first, he created a very fine series of landscape paintings, the best known of which is called The Rooks Have Come Back. It's a very simple painting. A frozen pond. A distant monastery. Snow on the ground. But in the birch trees, the rooks are building their nests. Winter is dying, spring is coming. And this, my friends, is my message to you. Spring is coming. In the Russian heartland, there is a yearning for change. And I feel the same thing in Europe. A longing to throw off the dictatorship of capitalism, of degenerate liberalism, of America. A longing to reclaim an older world of tradition in the spirit. So I say to you, join us. Leave the U.S. to their pornography, their blood-sucking corporations and their empty consumerism. Leave them to their reign of quantity. Together, Europe and Russia can build a new imperium, true to our ancient cultures, true to the old beliefs. Eve scans the ranks of the audience. Sees the rapt gazes, the mute nods of agreement, the desperate yearning to believe in the golden age that Kedren promises. In the center of the front row is a young woman in a black sweater and plaid skirt. She is a few years younger than Eve, and beautiful, even at a distance. On impulse, Eve raises her phone, and surreptitiously zooming in on the woman's face, photographs her. She catches her in profile, lips parted, gazing fervently up at Kedren. The speech gathers pace. Kedren recalls another who dreamt of a new imperium, a 1,000-year Reich, no less, but dismisses the Nazis for their crude racism and lack of higher consciousness. He makes an exception of the Waffen-SS, from whose rigorous idealism, he says, much can be learned. This is too much for one audience member, a middle-aged man who stands up and starts shouting incoherently at the stage. Within seconds, two figures in quasi-military clothing appear from the shadows at the back of the hall, grab the man, and half lead him, half drag him towards the exit. A half-minute later, to desultory cheers, they return without him. Kedren smiles beatifically. There's always one, no? In all, he speaks for about an hour, setting out his mystical, authoritarian vision for the Northern Hemisphere. Eve is appalled but fascinated. Kedren is charismatic, and satanically persuasive. That he will make true believers out of those assembled here tonight, she is in no doubt. He is not yet well known in Europe, but in Russia he commands a growing following, and has a small army of dedicated street fighters ready to do his will. And so my friends, I finish as I started, with that simple message. Spring is coming. Our day is dawning. The rooks have come back. Thank you. As one, the audience rises to its feet. As they cheer, stamp their feet, and applaud, Kedren stands at the lectern, unmoving. Then, with a small bow, he leaves the stage. Slowly, as Eve watches from the gallery, the hall empties. The spectators have a dazed look, as if waking from a dream. After a couple of minutes, accompanied by the ponytailed master of ceremonies and flanked by the 2-foot soldiers who ejected the protester, Kedren appears in the auditorium. He is quickly surrounded by admirers, who take it in turn to address a few words to him and shake his hand. The woman from the front row waits on the outskirts of the group, a faint smile touching her sharp, cat-like features. If I dressed like that I'd look like a librarian, Eve muses. So how come this little fascist princess gets to look like Audrey Hepburn? Kedren certainly registered her, and gives her a glance as if to say, wait, just let me finish with these people and you'll have my full attention. Soon, watched with barely suppressed amusement by the shaven-headed foot soldiers, the two of them are deep in conversation. Her body language, the head fetchingly tilted, the neat little breasts outthrust, makes her availability unambiguously clear. But eventually she settles for shaking his hand, pulls on her parka, and vanishes into the night. Eve is one of the last to depart the hall. She waits outside at a nearby bus stop, and when Kedren and his party leave the building, she follows them at a discreet distance. After a couple of minutes the four men turn into an Argentinian steak restaurant in Red Lion Street, where they are clearly expected. Deciding to call it a night, Eve makes for Holborn Tube Station. It's gone 9:30, and she's too late for the bridge tournament. But she'll get to the club in time to grab herself a large vodka and cranberry juice and watch Nico play a few hands. She needs to wind down. One way and another, it's been a weird day. At a little after 9:45, when she's satisfied that the Russians are settled in, Villanelle moves away from the doorway from where she's been watching the steakhouse, and takes a back route to the hotel. As she moves through the lobby towards the lifts, her face shadowed by her fur-trimmed hood, she directs a smile and a brief flutter of her leather-gloved fingers at the reception desk, where Gerald Watts is still on duty. Letting herself into room 416, Villanelle opens the valise, takes out a packet of surgical gloves, and exchanges a pair for the leather ones she's wearing. Then, from a sealed polythene bag, she takes a micro-transmitter the size of a fingernail, and a pinch of blue tack. Placing this in the pocket of her parka, she leaves the room and takes the stairs up to the 5th floor, where she seems to straighten a picture on the wall outside room 521. This done, she continues upwards to the 6th floor, where the stairs terminate in an exit to the roof. It's unlocked, and stepping outside she conducts a quick reconnaissance of the area, noting the placement of chimney stacks and fire escape ladders. Then, without hurry, she returns to the 4th floor. Back in her room she switches on an iPod-sized UHF receiver, and inserts one of the in-ear headphones. Nothing, as she expected, just a faint, ambient hiss. Pocketing the receiver, leaving one earbud trailing, she takes a waterproof case from the valise. Inside, each component lying in its bed of customized foam, is the weapon she ordered from Constantine, a polymer-bodied CC-75 9mm handgun and an ISIS-2 suppressor. Villanelle prefers a lightweight action on a combat weapon, and the CZ's trigger pull weight has been adjusted to 2 kilos for double-action firing, and 1 kilo for single action. Hotel room assassination, she knows, is a complex science. Taking down the target is easy, it's doing so swiftly, silently and without collateral damage that's difficult. There must be no recognizable gunshot report, no scream of alarm or pain, no bullets smacking through plasterboard partition walls, or worse, through the guests on the other side of them. So after attaching the suppressor, Villanelle loads the Czech handgun with Russian-made Chernaya Rosa, Black Rose, hollow point rounds. These are constructed with an oxidized copper jacket whose 6 sections, on impact, peel back like petals. This slows penetration, initiates a massive and incapacitating shockwave, and causes enhanced disruption of tissue along the wound path. For a 9mm round, the Black Rose's stopping power is unequaled. Villanelle waits, her breathing steady. Visualizes and revisualizes the coming course of events. Replays every conceivable scenario. Through the headphones, she hears hotel guests bid each other goodnight, snatches of laughter, doors closing. It's more than an hour and a half before she hears what she's been waiting for, voices speaking Russian. Come in for 5 minutes. I've got a bottle of Staraya Moskva. We need to run over arrangements for tomorrow. Villanelle considers. The drunker they all are, the better. But she can't leave it too late. She hears murmurs of assent, and the sound of the door closing. Again, Villanelle waits. It's past 1 a.m. when the security team finally, and noisily, leaves the room. But how drunk is Kedren? Will he remember the wide-eyed young woman he met at the Conway Hall? She picks up the hotel phone and dials room 521. A slurred voice answers. Duh. She answers in English. Mr. Kedren? Victor? It's Julia. We spoke at the lecture. You said to call you later. Well. It's later. Silence. Where are you? Here. At the hotel. Okay. I gave you my room number, yes? Yes. I'll come up. She puts on the parka. The valise is now empty except for a clear plastic evidence bag. Opening this, Villanelle shakes its contents into the valise, which she then stows in the wardrobe. The evidence bag goes into the inside pocket of her parka. Then, after a last look around the room, she leaves, holding the CZ75 by the suppressor so that the body of the handgun is up her sleeve. Outside room 521, she taps lightly on the door. There's a pause, and it opens a few inches. Kedren is flushed, his hair awry, his shirt open halfway to the waist. His eyes narrow as he examines her. Can I come in? She asks, tilting her head and looking up at him. He bows, semi-ironically. Ushers her in with a vague, sweeping gesture. The room is similar to Villanelle's own, but larger. An ugly gilt chandelier hangs from the ceiling. Take off your coat, he says, sitting down heavily on the bed. And get us a drink. She slips off her parka and drops it into an armchair, the CZ75 concealed in the sleeve. A side table holds an empty bottle of Staraya Moskva vodka and 4 used glasses. Villanelle checks the fridge. In the freezer there's a plastic half bottle of duty-free Stolichnaya. Uncapping the bottle, she pours a liberal amount into 2 of the glasses, and meeting his gaze, hands him one. A toast, he says blearily, his eyes dropping to her breasts. We must have a toast. To love. To beauty. Villanelle smiles. I drink to our ruined home. She begins, speaking Russian. And to life's evils, too. He stares at her for a moment, his expression at once surprised and melancholy, and continues the Akhmatova poem. I drink to the loneliness we share. He throws back the vodka. And I drink. There's a sound like a snapping stick, and Kedren is dead. Blood jets briefly from the entry wound beside his left nostril. I drink to you, murmurs Villanelle, completing the couplet as she pulls the bedclothes over him. Quickly, she pulls on the parka and makes for the door. As she's leaving the room, she finds herself face to face with one of Kedren's pet thugs. He's broad-shouldered, scowling, and smells of cheap cologne. Shh, hisses Villanelle. Victor's sleeping. The eyes narrow in the skull-like head. Some instinct tells him that something is wrong. That he's fucked up. He tries to look past her, and realizes far too late that the Glock 19 that he collected from the driver this morning is in his shoulder holster, not in his hand. Villanelle puts 2 rounds through the base of his nose, and as his knees go, catches the front of his flight jacket and swings him back through the door of the room. He falls backwards, hitting the monogrammed hotel carpet like a ton of condemned beef. She briefly considers dragging the body out of view, but it will take more time than it will save. Then the phone in the room starts ringing, and she knows she has to get out. Making for the stairs she passes Skullhead's colleague and Ponytail, hears them running to Kedren's room. One look inside the door and they're after her, pounding along the corridor. Villanelle races up the stairs to the 6th floor, continues upwards, and bursts out into the night. The roof is virgin white, and a blizzard of snow swirls around her as she bolts the stairwell door. Visibility is no more than a few feet. She has perhaps 15 seconds start. The door splinters and the lock flies outwards. The 2 men come out fast, braking left and right respectively, leaving the door swinging in the icy wind. The roof is deserted. Footsteps lead from the stairwell to a balustrade, beyond which is whirling darkness. Suspecting a trap, the 2 men duck behind a chimney stack. Then, very slowly, the younger man leopard crawls across the snowy roof to the balustrade, peers over, and beckons cautiously to Ponytail. There, just visible, is Villanelle, with her back to them, the parka whipping around her body in the wind. She appears to be watching the chimney stack. Both men discharge their weapons, and 7 suppressed headshots tear through the parka hood. When the slight figure doesn't fall they freeze, there's an instant of terrible comprehension, and then their heads twitch in near unison as Villanelle squeezes off 2 shots from the fire escape behind them. Like lovers, the 2 men fold into each other. And stepping up from the fire escape ladder, unknotting the sleeves of her parka from the flue pipe, Villanelle watches them die. As always, it's fascinating. There can't be much brain function left after a black rose round has bloomed inside your cerebellum, clawing its way through your memory, instincts and emotions, but somehow, some spark lingers on. And then, inevitably, dims. Standing there on the rooftop, in her cage of snow, Villanelle feels the longed-for power surge. The feeling of invincibility that sex promises, but only a successful killing truly confers. The knowledge that she stands alone at the whirling heart of events. And looking around her, with the dead men at her feet, she sees the city resolved into its essential colors. Black, white and red. Darkness, snow and blood. Perhaps it takes a Russian to understand the world in those terms. That Saturday is, without exception, the worst day of Eve Pilastri's life. 4 men shot dead on her watch, an A-grade assassin on the loose in London, her MI5 superiors incandescent, the Kremlin no less so, a Cobra group convened, and, it goes without saying, her Thames House career fucked. When the office ring to tell her that Victor Kedren has been found shot dead in his hotel room, she's still in bed. At first she thinks that she's going to faint, and then, staggering to the bathroom, and finding the corridor blocked by Nico's bicycle, she vomits all over her bare feet. By the time Nico reaches her, she's crouched on the floor in her nightdress, ash gray and shaking. Simon rings while Nico is sitting with her in the kitchen. They agree to meet at the Vernon Hotel. Somehow, she manages to get dressed and drive there. There's quite a crowd in Red Lion Street, held at bay by a barrier of crime scene tape and 2 police constables. The senior investigating officer at the scene is DCI Gary Hurst. He knows Eve, and hurries her into the hotel, away from the probing camera lenses. In the reception area, he directs her to a banquette, pours her a cup of sugary tea from a thermos flask, and watches as she drinks it. Better? Yeah. Thanks, Gary. She closes her eyes. God, what a shitstorm. Well, it's a colorful one. I'll say that. So what have we got? 4 dead. Shot at close range, all headshots, definitely a pro job. Victim 1, Victor Kedren, Russian, university professor, found dead in his room. With him, Victim 2, late 20s, looks like hired muscle. On the roof, Victims 3 and 4. We think 3 is Vitaly Chevarev, supposedly a political associate of Kedren's, but almost certainly with organized crime connections. 4 is more muscle. All armed with Glock 19s except for Kedren. The pair on the roof discharged 7 shots between them. Must have picked up the weapons here. The DCI shrugs. Easily done. Suggests they were expecting trouble. Maybe. Maybe they just feel happier if they're carrying. Do you want to get suited up and go upstairs? The other Thames House guy's waiting for you up there. Simon? Yeah. Sure. Where do I change? Staging area that way. He points. I'll be up in a minute. In the staging area Eve is handed a white Tyvek coverall, a mask, gloves and booties. When she is finally suited up, dread floods through her. She's seen plenty of photographs of gunshot victims, but never any actual corpses. She copes, though, and with Simon standing businesslike and imperturbable beside her, makes herself remember the details. The raised, grayish rims of the entry wounds, the thin trails of blackened blood, the faraway expressions. Kedren, his sightless eyes directed at the ceiling, has a slight frown on his face, as if he's trying to remember something. You did your best, says Simon. She shakes her head. I should have insisted. I should have made the right decision in the first place. He shrugs. You made your concerns known. And you were overruled. She's about to answer when DCI Hurst calls her name and beckons to her from the top of the stairs. Thought you'd like to know. Julia Fanine, 26. Left the hotel in the early hours of the morning. Bed not slept in, but an empty overnight bag left in her 4th-floor room. Forensics in there now. What do the front desk say? Eve asks. They say she's a looker. We're going through the CCTV footage. A dark certainty fills Eve. She feels beneath her Tyvek suit for her phone. Calls up the photograph of the woman at the meeting. Could that be her? The DCI stares at it. Where did you get this? Eve is telling him about the meeting when his phone rings, and he holds up a hand. Listens in frowning silence. Okay, he says. Turns out the credit card she showed the hotel when she checked in yesterday was stolen at Gatwick Airport a week ago, from the real Julia Fanine. But we've got fingerprints and hopefully DNA from the overnight bag, and we're soon going to have some CCTV stills. Can you stick around? For as long as it takes. She glances at Simon. I'm afraid that shopping trip's going to have to wait. That afternoon Eve attends a meeting at Tem's house, in the course of which she is questioned in detail as to her decision concerning Kedren's protection and her subsequent change of mind, debriefed about the police inquiry, and finally, ordered to take 10 days home leave. That she will return to the office to discover she has been demoted or reassigned is a foregone conclusion. At home, she can't settle. There are 100 things to do about the flat: sorting, storing, cleaning, tidying, but Eve can't bring herself to embark on any of them. Instead she goes for long, directionless walks through the snow on Hampstead Heath, constantly checking her phone. She's given Nico the bare bones of the situation and he doesn't press her for more, but she can tell that he's hurt and frustrated by his inability to help. She's always known that the secrecy aspect of intelligence work imposes its own unique strains on a marriage. What's shocking is just how corrosive it proves to be. How her silence eats away at the very foundations of the trust between herself and Nico. The accommodation that they reached, early on in their marriage, was that while her working hours belonged to Tem's house and the service, at the end of the day she came home to him. What they shared, the complicity and intimacy of their evenings and nights, was infinitely more important than the things that they couldn't. But the Kedren murder spreads like a toxin into every aspect of her life. At night, instead of slipping into bed beside Nico and healing the rifts of the day by making love, she stays up until the early hours of the morning scanning the internet, and hunting for new reports on the killings. The Sunday papers make what they can of the case. The Observer hints at possible Mossad involvement, and the Sunday Times speculates that Kedren might have been eliminated on the orders of the Kremlin because his increasingly fascist outpourings were beginning to embarrass the president. The police, however, release no more than the barest details. Certainly nothing about a female suspect. And then, on Wednesday morning, just as her toast is beginning to brown, Nico usually prepares breakfast, but he's already at work. Eve gets a call from DCI Hearst. The DNA analysis on the hair samples found in the valise, a rush job by the forensic lab, has come up with a match on the UK database. An arrest has been made at Heathrow. Can Eve come to Paddington Green Police Station to assist with identification? Eve can, and as she replaces the receiver, the smoke alarm goes off. Throwing the burning toast into the sink with a pair of salad tongs, she opens the kitchen window, and stabs vainly at the alarm with a broom handle. I'm really not cut out for this domestic stuff, she thinks bleakly. Perhaps it's just as well I'm not pregnant. Not that that's exactly a likelihood, with the way things are going. Paddington Green Police Station is a brutal, utilitarian building that smells of anxiety and stale air. Beneath ground level is a high-security custody suite where prisoners suspected of terrorist offenses are held. The interview room is gray-painted and striplit, a one-way glass window takes up most of one wall. Eve and Hearst sit beneath it, with the prisoner sitting opposite them. It's the woman who was at Kedren's lecture. Eve is expecting to feel a fierce triumph at the sight of her. Instead, as at the Conway Hall, she's struck by her beauty. The woman, probably in her mid-20s, has an oval, high-cheekbone face, framed by a dark, glossy bob. She's simply dressed in black jeans and a gray t-shirt that shows off her slender arms and neat, small-breasted frame. She looks tired, and more than a little confused, but no less graceful for all that, and Eve is suddenly conscious of her own shapeless hoodie and untended hair. What would I give to look like that? She wonders. My brain? Hearst introduces himself and my colleague from the Home Office, and switching on the voice recorder, officially cautions the suspect, who has elected to dispense with the services of a lawyer. And looking at her, Eve suddenly knows that something is wrong. That this woman is as incapable of murder as she is. That the police case is about to fall apart. Please state your name, Hearst says to her. The woman leans forward towards the voice recorder. My name is Lucy Drake. And your profession? She darts a look at Eve. Her eyes, even beneath the strip lights, are vivid emerald. I'm an actress. An actress and model. And what were you doing at the Vernon Hotel in Red Lion Street, last Friday night? Lucy Drake gazes thoughtfully at her hands, which are folded on the table in front of her. Can I start at the beginning? Even as her heart sinks at how completely she and the police have been blindsided, Eve can't help but admire the elegance of the deception. It all started, Lucy explains, with a call received by her agent. The client represented himself as belonging to a production company that was making a television series about different aspects of human behavior. In this connection, they needed an attractive, confident young actress to undertake a series of social experiments, in which she would play a number of roles. The filming would take place over 5 days in London and Los Angeles, and the successful applicant would be paid £4,000 a day. It was all a bit vague, Lucy says. But given the fee, and the exposure the program would bring, I wasn't too worried. So that afternoon I took the tube from Queen's Park, where I live, to the St. Martin's Lane Hotel, where they were holding the interviews. The director was there, Peter something, I think he was Eastern European, and a cameraman who was videoing everyone. There were several other girls there, and we were called in one by one. When it came to my turn, Peter asked me to role-play a couple of scenes with him. One where I was booking into a hotel and I had to make the desk guy fall for me, and one where I had to approach a speaker after a lecture and seduce him, basically. The idea in both scenarios was to be super flirty and charming but not come across like a hooker. Anyway, I gave it my best shot, and when I'd finished, he asked me to wait downstairs in this Cuban tea house place and order anything I wanted. So I did, and 40 minutes later he came down and said, "Congratulations, I've seen everyone and the job's yours." Over the next 2 days Peter went through everything that Lucy was required to do. She was measured for the clothes that she would wear, and told that this costume had to be precisely adhered to, with no changes or substitutions. On Friday afternoon she was to book into the Vernon Hotel under the name of Julia Fanine and take an overnight bag up to her room. Peter would provide the credit card that she would use and also the bag, which she was not under any circumstances to open. Leaving the bag in the room, she was to walk to the Conway Hall, around the corner in Red Lion Square, and buy a ticket to the 8 p.m. lecture given by Victor Kedren. After the lecture she was to gain personal access to Kedren, charm and flatter him, and arrange to meet him at his hotel later that night. With that done, she was to meet Peter on the corner of the square, give him her hotel room key card, and take a taxi home to Queen's Park. The following morning, Lucy was told, Peter would pick her up early, drive her to Heathrow, and put her on a plane to Los Angeles. There she would be met, put up at a hotel, and given instructions for the second stage of filming. "And that's how it worked out?" asks Hearst. "Yes. He came round at 6 a.m. with a first-class return to LA, and I was in the air by 9. I was met at the airport by a driver who took me to the Chateau Marmont, where I got a message that the filming had been cancelled, but I was welcome to stay on at the hotel. So I used the time to go and see some acting agents, and at midday yesterday caught the return flight to Heathrow, where I was, arrested. For murder. Which was kind of a surprise." "Really?" asks Hearst. "Yes, really." Lucy wrinkles her nose and looks around the interview room. "You know, there's a really weird smell of burnt toast in here." An hour later, Eve and Hearst are standing on the steps at the rear of the police station, watching as an unmarked BMW turns out of the car park, headed for Queen's Park. Hearst is smoking. As the BMW passes, Eve catches a final glimpse of the flawless profile that she photographed in the Conway Hall. "Do you think we're ever going to get a useful description of this Peter character?" Eve asks. "Unlikely. We'll bring Lucy back to help us make up a photo fit when she's had a few hours sleep, but I'm not hopeful. It was all far too well planned." "And you really don't think she was in on any of it?" "No. I don't. We'll check her story out in detail, obviously, but my guess is that she isn't guilty of anything except naivety." Eve nods. She so much wanted it to be true. The successful audition, the big break into TV. Yeah. Hearst treads out his cigarette on the wet concrete step. He played her just right. And us, too. Eve frowns. "So how do you think 2 of Lucy's hairs came to be in that overnight bag, if she never opened it?" "My guess would be that Peter, or one of his people, took the hairs during the fake audition, perhaps out of her hairbrush. And then our shooter drops them in the bag after she's taken Lucy's place in the hotel. And here's a question for you. Why Los Angeles? Why go to the trouble of flying that girl halfway round the world when she's already played her part?" "That's easy," says Eve. "To make sure she's out of the picture by the time the news of the murder breaks. They can't risk her reading about it online, or hearing about it on the radio, and going straight to the police with what she knows. So they make sure that she's taking off for LA, an 11-hour flight, at the precise time that the murder's discovered on Saturday morning. Which not only renders Lucy incommunicado, but also sets a perfect false trail, giving the real killer and her team plenty of time to cover their tracks and vanish." Hearst nods. "And once she's at the swanky Sunset Boulevard Hotel, she's going to stay for the duration." "Exactly. She may, just possibly, see or read something about Kedren, but that's all happening on the other side of the world. Meanwhile, she's got Hollywood agents to see. That's what's going to be uppermost in her mind. And then, when they're ready, and the DNA results are in, they serve her up to us on a plate. He shakes his head. You have to admire their cheek. Yeah, well, cheeky or not, that woman shot 4 foreign nationals dead on our turf. Can we go back and see that CCTV footage again? Absolutely. It's been edited into a single, silent loop. Lucy Drake walking into the hotel foyer in her parka, carrying the valise, and checking in, the suggestiveness of her body language apparent. Lucy exiting the lift on the 4th floor and walking to room 416. Lucy leaving the hotel without the valise, raising the hood of her parka as she goes. Okay, stop, Eve says. That's the last of her, agreed? From now on the woman in the parka is our killer. Agreed, says Hurst. He runs the footage in X16 slow motion. Infinitely slowly, as if moving through treacle, the hooded figure enters the hotel, lifts a blurry hand in the direction of the front desk, and vanishes out of shot. Her face is invisible, as it is throughout the footage in the hotel corridors. Look at her planting that bug outside Kedren's room, says Hurst. She knows she's on camera, but she doesn't care. She knows we can't make her. You have to admit, Eve, she's good. You weren't able to pull any prints off the bug, or anywhere else? Look closely. Surgical gloves. Motherfucker, Eve breathes. Hurst raises an eyebrow. She's a murdering bitch, Gary, and she's cost me my job. I want her, dead or alive. Good luck with that, says Hurst. At their Avenue Glaber apartment, Gilles Mercier and his wife Anne-Laure are entertaining. Among those at dinner are a junior minister from the Department of External Trade, the director of one of France's major hedge funds, and the executive vice president of Paris's most important fine art auction house. Given the company, Gilles has gone to considerable trouble to ensure that everything is just so. The food has been catered by Fouquet's on the Champs-Élysées, the wine, 2005 Puligny Montrachet, 1998 Haut Brion, is from Gilles' own carefully curated cellar, and precisely dimmed spotlights pick out the cabinet of ormolu clocks and the 2 Bodine oils of the Beach de Trouville, which the executive vice president has recognized as fakes, and indeed has whispered as much to his younger male companion. The conversation among the men has covered predictable ground. Immigration, the fiscal naivety of the socialists, the Russian billionaires forcing up the price of holiday homes in Val d'Isère and the Ile de Ré, and the upcoming season at the Opéra. Their wives and the executive vice president's friend, meanwhile, have covered the new Phoebe Philo collection, the fabulousness of Primark pajamas, the latest Ryan Gosling film, and a charity ball that the hedge fund director's wife is organizing. Invited by Anne-Laure to balance the numbers, Villanelle is bored senseless. The junior minister, whose knee has nudged hers more than once under the table, is questioning her about her activities as a day trader, and she is answering in evasive generalities. So how was London? He inquires. I was there in November. Were you very busy? Yes, work's always murder. But it was lovely to be there. Hyde Park in the snow. The Christmas lights, the pretty shop windows. And in the evenings? He allows the question to hang suggestively in the air. In the evenings, I read and went to bed early. Alone? In your Primark pajamas? This time it's his hand that finds her knee. Precisely. I'm afraid I'm a rather dull girl. Married to my work. But can I ask you, who does your wife's hair? That layered style looks lovely on her. The junior minister's smile grows fainter, and his hand moves away. The minutes tick by, glasses and plates are filled and refilled, Élysée Palace rumors and 50-year-old Armagnac circulate. Finally the evening winds down and the guests are brought their coats. Come on, says Anne-Laure, grabbing Villanelle by the arm. Let's go, too. Are you sure? Murmurs Villanelle, eyeing Gilles, who is corking bottles and issuing instructions to the caterers. I'm sure, hisses Anne-Laure. If I don't get out of this flat right now I'm going to scream. And look at you, all dressed up. If ever I saw a girl who needed an adventure. 5 minutes later, the two of them are rounding the Arc de Triomphe at speed in Villanelle's silver Audi Roadster. It's a cold, clear night with tiny flecks of snow silvering the air. The Roadster's roof is lowered and Eloise Letizier is blasting from the sound system. Where are we going? Villanelle shouts, the icy wind whipping at her hair as they swing onto the Avenue des Champs-Élysées. Doesn't matter, and Laura mouths back. Just drive. Villanelle puts her foot down, and whooping and laughing, the two women race into the glittering darkness of the Paris night. On the penultimate day of her enforced leave, an envelope bearing Eve's name falls through the letterbox of the flat. The writing paper is headed with the imprint of the Travelers Club, in Pall Mall. The unsigned message, handwritten in slanting italics, is short and to the point. Please come to the office of BQ Optics Limited, 2nd floor, above Goodge Street Underground Station tomorrow, Sunday, at 10:30 a.m. Bring this letter with you. Confidential. Eve reads the note several times. The Travelers Club writing paper suggests that the correspondent has security services or foreign office connections. The fact that it is handwritten and hand-delivered suggests an entirely sensible distrust of email. It could of course be a hoax, but who would bother? At 9:30 the next day she leaves Nico sitting at the kitchen table amid a sea of pamphlets. He's assessing the costs and benefits of converting the attic into a miniature hydroponic farm, sustained by low-energy LED lighting, and producing pak choi and broccoli. The entrance to the BQ Optics office is on Tottenham Court Road. Noting it as she exits Goodge Street Tube Station, she crosses the road and watches the place for 5 minutes from outside Heels, the furniture store. The tube station and the first-floor offices are faced with brown glazed tile, and surmounted by a dingy residential block. The second-floor offices appear deserted. But when she presses the bell at the side of the entrance, she is buzzed in immediately. A staircase leads to the first floor, the headquarters of a recruitment agency, and thence by narrower stairs upwards. The door to the BQ Optics office is ajar. Feeling a little foolish, Eve pushes it open and stands back. Nothing happens for a moment. Then a tall figure in an overcoat steps into the dusty light. Miss Pilastri? Thank you for coming. It's Mrs. and you are? Richard Edwards, Mrs. Pilastri. My apologies. She recognizes him, and is astounded. Former station chief in Moscow, now head of the Russia desk at MI6, he is a very senior figure indeed in the intelligence world. And the cloak and dagger. Sorry for that, too. She shakes her head, bemused. Come in, take a seat. She walks through. The office is unheated and dusty, its windows almost opaque with grime. The only furniture is an elderly steel desk, with 2 takeaway cups of Costa coffee on it, and a pair of rust-scarred folding chairs. I guessed milk but no sugar. Thank you, perfect. She takes a sip. I've become aware of your situation at Thames House, Mrs. Pilastri. Eve, please. He nods, his gaze austere in the dim light of the window. Let me save time. You are being held responsible for failing to prevent the murder of Victor Kedren at the hands of an unknown female. Your initial judgment was not to request Metropolitan Police protection for Kedren, but you then changed your mind, and found this decision blocked. Correct? Eve nods. Substantially, yes. My information, and you're going to have to take my word on this, is that this was not due to administrative inflexibility or departmental budget issues. Certain elements at Thames House, and indeed at Vauxhall Cross, were determined that Kedren should be unprotected. She stares at him. You're saying that officers of the security services conspired to assist in his murder? Something like that. But why? The short answer is that I don't know. But there has definitely been pressure brought to bear. Whether this is an issue of ideology, corruption, or what the Russians call kompromat, essentially blackmail, it's impossible to say. But there's no shortage of individuals and institutions who would have liked to see Kedren silenced. What he offered was the blueprint of a new, fascist superstate, implacably hostile to the capitalist West. It wouldn't have come into being tomorrow, but look a little further downstream, and the prospects are grim. So you think those responsible might belong to some pro-Western, pro-democracy group? Not necessarily. Could easily be another hard-right outfit, determined to do things their own way. He stares at the traffic on Tottenham Court Road. I contacted the Russian foreign minister last week via, let's call it the old spies network. I promised him that as Kedren was murdered on British soil, we would find his killer. He accepted this, but made it quite clear that until such time as we did so, a state of diplomatic hostility would exist between our respective nations. He turns to face her. Eve, I want you to go to Thames House tomorrow morning, and offer your resignation, which will be accepted. Then I want you to work for me. Not from Vauxhall Cross, but from this office, which we appear to own. You will receive an CIS executive grade salary, a deputy, and full tech-com support. Your mission, which you will prosecute by any means necessary, is to identify the killer of Victor Kedren. You will discuss this with no one outside of your team, and you will answer only to me. Anything you need in the way of extra personnel, watcher teams, armed backup, you will clear through me, and only through me. In effect, you will operate as if in hostile territory. Moscow rules. Eve's thoughts are ricocheting all over the place. Why me? She asks. Surely you've got to be brutal, because you're the one person that I know not to be compromised. How far the rot spreads, I can't say. But I've looked pretty closely at your record, and my judgment is that you're equal to the task. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is going to be hard and dangerous, whoever this shooter is, and there are echoes of several high-profile international kills by a woman in the last couple of years. She's dug in deep, and she's very, very well protected. If you take this on, you must do the same thing. Dig in deep. He looks around the bare, cold room. It's going to be a long winter. Eve stands there. She has the dizzying impression that the world has slowed. There's a moment of intense silence. I'll do it, she says. I'll hunt her down. Whatever it takes. Richard Edwards nods. Holds out his hand. And Eve knows that nothing will ever be the same again.
That's it for today. Thank you for watching. If you want to know more about us, find our profile links from the description below. If you have any suggestions, do send us a message. See you all in the next video. Take care.